perspective canvas to map a transition towards a new consumption paradigm. And as you maybe just noticed, we're also recording this session. So if that's all okay, then no need to comment. If it's not okay, just give us a sign. And it's one of the first events in our quite fresh community here in Singapore, because I think we got started somewhere in April this year. So what today we will cover, it's 90-minute session. It's a lot of doing. In the beginning, we're going to just give a couple of insights. First, a very quick intro about ourselves, about the hub, a bit the rules of engagement of today, the intent, and then setting the context. And also, in order to set the context, we have introduced to a lovely lady with us, Maggie and Shinta, and they will provide some perspective. I hear a bit of background noise, so if everybody can go to mute, that would be great. Thanks a lot. That's already much better. Thank you. I still hear myself an echo in the background, so okay. All right. And then after the introduction, it's all about, yeah, let's do something, let's use it. Let's use this multi-level perspective canvas. What it is, we'll get to that. And then we have 60 minutes of co-creation activity. All right. So System Innovation Hub, Singapore Hub. I think at the moment we're around 5 people. Started off with Marissa and with Anna, who are leading our hub. I joined a bit later, I think around April, May times. And then also with Yang Lu and Jacqueline. And all of us are quite passionate about innovation, societal innovation, but also around system thinking. So it was a great opportunity to come together, and why the Singapore Hub for System Innovation. What is important for us? There's a couple of aspects that are being shared in our manifesto. So it's all about capacity building. It's all about increasing knowledge, not only personal, but also organizational, societal. It's also about bringing together different domains and industries. I think that's also what we do today, because we have a quite broad topic to tackle today, a new paradigm of consumption, but you can approach it from many different angles. And that's also the intent. If you talk about systems, you need to incorporate the whole. So that's about capacity building. A very important aspect in systems is exchange, because without exchange, there's no reason for being. So one system exchanging internally, but also externally. And that's also what we're doing today. It's bringing new ideas. It's creating a dialogue. It's sharing perspective. So I think today really falls into that aspect of exchange, and also accessibility. So bringing new ideas, bringing awareness around system innovation, a couple of frameworks that you can use there, how to apply it. There's many different ways of application. So we're also interested to learning from you today. And at the end of the day, it's also about creating an impact together, which is quite clear. Also importantly, we're one hub. There's many hubs around the world. I think last year the hub creation started with Jos, who's also today online. He's the founder of I think the global movement of system innovation. You can also access that community with this QR code here, and then you go to a platform of Mighty Networks. It's an engagement platform. We can interact with each other. Also, what I think drove me to join with system innovation is you have a lot of access to insights, to tools, to canvases. That's really interesting. So please go ahead and take a snapshot of the QR code, or if you're already a member, even better. Okay. Intent and rules of engagement of today. So it's all about co-creation. It's all about learning. As you will see later on, we will jump onto a canvas. And it's not today that we need to solve the world's biggest problems. It's just that we learn from each other, that we do stuff. And it's not that we need to reach a certain finish line. but it's all about the multi-level perspective canvas that we're going to apply with the aspect of today, this new paradigm of consumption. And how we will do that, I think we're all very skilled now with virtual interaction. So let's be open, let's collaborate. We're going to do that via Miro, so putting post-its on a big board. If there's a conversation, one at a time, mute when not speaking. I think that's all very straightforward. The key thing is let's have some fun. Let's use the chat box also for questions, and feedback is also very welcome. All right, so getting a bit closer to what today is all about. It's about the context, and it's about, again, repeating, it's the MLP canvas to go to a new consumption paradigm. And you can approach that in many different aspects. As we all know, system innovation, it's connected with wicked problems, because wicked problem has a lot of inlets and also a lot of outlets. But just a couple to get a bit the thoughts flowing is, consumption. How can you approach that? Is it all about reducing consumption? Is that the key way forward? Because we know with the population growing, the rate of use growing, we will need a couple of Earths to provide us with all the resources we need. On the other hand, you can also look at it from a manufacturing side, from a retailer side, who are tapping into consumer psychology and also driving in that way consumption to get higher volumes, higher profit. Do we need to stop that, or do we need to use that in another way? Are all consumers as aware as we think around these influences on behavior or not? Do we need to work on that? And on top of this, there's many other angles, but just a couple to get the thoughts flowing. So maybe a first stake in the ground, and now we're still working in Zoom. We'll go to Miro later on just to keep a bit the flow of the session. And it would be great maybe if you can use the chat in the Zoom, and if you could share a bit, what are all the different roles we play in this system? Because the system is constructed out of many different smaller systems around actors. So what are a couple of roles we can play? If you can quickly share a couple, and then I'll have a look. I see a lot of people joining in from many different parts of the world: Bangladesh, South Africa, Barcelona, Italy. Great to have you all here. Paris. Now I'm also European, so I'm automatically thinking about the European football championships, but let's not go there. Maybe we can also bring that in with consumption. Is there somebody from Portugal? Because I'm from Belgium, and then maybe we'll can connect on Sunday evening, but that's not the topic of today. The role I play, a rampant consumer. Brussels, great to have Brussels here, Stefan. I'm a bit biased now. Consumer, intermediary, provider of services. Hi, everybody. Any other roles we can play, like end consumer? Can we be an influencer, an investor, a saver, a borrower, a business designer, an activist? So many different angles to this topic. Consumer, recycler, designer, yes. Producer, a change enabler. I think that's also what we're going to tap in today. So thanks all for the inputs. All right. And what we're going to use today is the MLP canvas, so multi-level perspective. And why is that important? Is because if you talk about transition in large-scale systems, one of the most thoroughly studied models was by Professor Frank Geels, if I'm not mistaken, from the University of Manchester. And what was really critical in this approach is that you have three levels. You have the macro level, the landscape as we call it, so representing the overall environment. Then the landscape is made out of different regimes. And at the end, it's the niches. So what are the small pockets and the new innovations? And transitions only can occur successfully if all of these three levels are connected and interacting with each other. And when there are certain hurdles of bottlenecks, by applying this canvas, we then can see where the bottlenecks are, whether on the landscape, the regime, the niche, or the interactions. More on this from Anna later on. I'll skip it for a second, but then you know in which direction we're going. Then I said we also have two practitioners of system thinking with us, Maggie and Shinta. And they have been active for quite a number of years together in this field in different areas. And that's why we also wanted to bring them on stage to share again different thoughts around system innovation, around this new paradigm of consumption. So first, I want to introduce Maggie. Maggie has quite a lot of experience, over 15 years working for WWF, for UNEP, also worked a long time, I think 10 years in fast-moving consumer goods, all around sustainability, all around having regulatory aspects. And now she's working or active at Vera as a lead for the plastic program and looking how to optimize plastic waste, how to think about new sustainable strategies, waste collection and recycling projects. I'm going to share the mic and the stage with her, and I'll pass the word. Here you go, Maggie. All the best.
Thanks a lot, Wesley. I almost heard that you said that I have 50 years of experience. Yeah, I wish not so much.
15, 15. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Just a very quick overall agenda that I like to cover, although it's only 5 minutes for my part, but I do hope that I can share some of my experiences with you, some of the pitfalls, and also maybe a bit of success. I definitely wouldn't call it a overall success. We just had little ups and downs throughout, what to do, what not to do, and also my past experiences running transformative initiatives. And I think as the organizers have asked me to be provocative, so I'll try as much as I can to be very provocative, so that you can see from my perspectives and how transformative initiatives in the past have been carried out. Next slide, please. So just to show you some of my projects in the past, I'll spend about a minute on each of them, and please feel free to ask me any questions in the chat box, and I'll try to answer them. So the first one I'd like to share with you is actually originally called the Singapore Alliance for Sustainable Palm Oil, and later on it became the first S became Southeast Asia, and at the very end it became Support Asia for Sustainable Palm Oil. So this is my first green alliance that I was managing at WWF Singapore. And of course, it's actually about palm oil. And we tried to actually get companies that are sourcing palm oil, which is essentially every single company, because palm oil is extremely ubiquitous throughout the entire industry, be it manufacturing or be it food manufacturing or household products. Every single manufacturing industry uses palm oil. So we tried to get companies on board and try to actually get them to commit to a very simple commitment, which is to actually adopt 100% certified sustainable palm oil. So it may sound like a very benign, very small ask. A lot of the companies did come on board with us. They thought that they should just change their cans of oil from palm oil to sustainable palm oil, which of course costs a little bit more. Little do they know that palm oil is actually everywhere. And we had to actually go through a lot of trouble looking at where palm oil is in their entire supply chain. It's not just the pure oil. And so that I would say that SASPO was not a success, because a lot of the companies felt that the hurdle was too high, and that the ones that joined SASPO did not live up to their commitments. So we first found out that these companies were interested in a time-bound commitment, meaning that at a certain point in time, they would have to reach 100%. But later on, we just realized that they just partly gave up. So it's almost like, sue me. Like, what can you do about this? If I didn't do it, are you going to sue me? And of course, as an NGO, WWF didn't have the funds to sue them. So that was the first Green Alliance and the mode of mechanism or the mode of change in how we move the market. Next, please. So the next one is a lot more successful, in my opinion. It was actually the Plastic Action or Pact also from WWF Singapore. At the very end of my tenure with WWF, we actually covered Hong Kong, my hometown, and also parts of Thailand and parts of Malaysia as well. Currently, it also covers the Philippines, actually the Philippines as well. And then currently it covers more than just that. And now I've lost track of how big they've become. So this is also a homegrown plan in Singapore. As you know, plastic is everywhere in Singapore. If you go to other countries, we feel that maybe other countries have been more successful in getting their consumers to use less plastic by themselves. In Singapore, as some of the participants know very well, that consumers have not actually caught on with this whole anti-plastic sentiment, which is good in a sense, but also bad in moving the market. The businesses we've engaged felt that consumers were not ready for this, and that there was a lot of reprisals. When NUS actually took out straws from their cafeterias, there was a very huge response from the students, and they actually threw away thousands of straws in front of reporters to not retaliate, but to protest how they feel that this is a cost-cutting scheme that's disguised in an environmental green measure. But of course, WWF backs it. And of course, this is actually to provide a commitment framework with a very holistic approach. It's not just to cut back on single-use plastic, but also on recovery, on adopting recycled content. So it is a very holistic plan, and we did get big names like, for example, Hilton and H&M, and also later on Danone, their Evian water brand, to join us. And this approach was to actually reward the first movers, so that the first movers get the pioneer halo, I would call it, or you can call it label. And they did actually really enjoy that. And a lot of the companies have this mandate to work on plastics anyway. And so the first one that they saw was Pact, and they really jumped onto it. In Hong Kong, we actually got, in Hong Kong and Singapore, actually, we got all the food delivery services to commit to actually a very, very aggressive plan. And of course, these food delivery companies are now the bomb, right? A lot of the food delivery companies are thriving in COVID environments. And so that was a really good move, in my opinion, and providing the pioneers with the reward. Next slide, please. The next project that was in huge attempt to actually move the market was my involvement with Sea Circular, a UNEP project. So United Nations Environment Program worked a lot on providing reports and providing conference opportunities for different organizations. This is their first time trying to engage the trade, and I would say that it's not very successful. We tried to engage the trade with roundtables that are sector focused, meaning that we'll host roundtables for hotels, for restaurants, and for manufacturing companies. And we did try to actually engage them in ways so that this would work throughout Southeast Asia. As the name suggests, it's actually sea as in ocean, and also Southeast Asia. My opinion is that when we talk to businesses and we give them a lot of leeway to be involved in a UN program, they are interested because that halo is much bigger. They do want a UN label to be attached to whatever CSR or whatever project they're doing. But if you don't provide a very straightforward framework for them, it is not going to be successful. They don't know what to do because they feel that as long as I'm participating in this dialogue, I would actually be able to rub off some of that halo. So reputation enhancement measures help. Thanks, Bernard. I think that it would if you have the right approach. If not, then it will be merely greenwashing. And so that's where I learned that without a very, very robust framework, most of these companies would just go in for the name and not participate in the ultimate commitment, which is why this program, in my opinion, failed. We didn't ask for upfront a time-bound quantitative commitment. We didn't ask them to commit to any type of cutbacks, but we asked them to engage in dialogue which is good if we actually are trying to set the framework, but the framework has already been done, as I mentioned in PACT. It was already successful in engaging the businesses. And Maya said this is happening with the 2030 agenda and private companies as well. Yeah, I gotta say there are so many of these fails, so I've lost count as well. The next project that I am currently still working on is the Global Dialogue on Seafood Traceability. So this is where the word dialogue comes in. The theory of change is actually not to provide a framework, but to provide a place where companies would talk about a framework and then come up with a standard. So it is the prelude of a standard, and later on did become a standard. So a year ago, the first standard for seafood traceability that is globally recognized and also put together with a multi-sectoral engagement, meaning that there are companies, there are NGOs, there are governments and intergovernmental bodies that came together to put together a standard was born. So the GDST, in short, is also an initiative by WWF. And currently it's actually on its way to detaching from the NGO background so that it's more like an industry-led initiative. There are very enthusiastic companies that are leading the way and pioneering and even doing what I call lateral coaching, so that companies are teaching companies how to adopt seafood traceability. And that is really important because no matter how hard NGOs do this call to action, it is very difficult for us to proceed with that kind of narrative. So my last 2 slides, I promise. Next one, please. Last thing I'm working on is actually what I'm doing right now. It's actually with the standards body called VERA, the plastic waste reduction standard. As I mentioned with the UNEP project, it's very difficult to actually provide a framework unless it's robust enough and unless it's proven to work. And by this time, after about 5 years of the world turning their attention to plastics, it is already now something that we have. We have the data, we have the proof of concept. We now know how to put together a standard. And now it's a very robust standard that's about 300 pages long. And we're trying to say that if you're interested, adopt this as a voluntary measure to account for your plastic footprint and buy plastic credits so that you can invest beyond your supply, your value chain to make sure that you're net circular, meaning that you're not actually circular, but you're actually net circular by investing into other projects around the world. And this is also happening in Singapore as well. And so I hope that this is actually a good outline of what projects I've actually tried having my hands on. The next part is actually just the reason why some of these came to be, and it's my last slide. Next slide, please. So the circle of denial is what I want you to keep in mind. Consumers are not yet asking for green initiatives. Thank you, Gabriella. Thanks for your comment. Consumers are not yet actively asking, not like in the Western world. They're not providing enough pressure to these manufacturers and businesses and brands to do the right thing. And that there's a circle of denial with a finger pointing game. The government thinks, I do know some of you actually work for the Singapore government. So in my opinion, the government is actually still waiting on the trade to reach this sense of maturity when they're ready for mandatory approaches. And also the producers are waiting for the government to act, and retailers are saying that they're counting on consumers to act, and then they'll put pressure on the producers upstream. And so this is really a finger pointing game ultimately. And I'm really hoping that some of these past examples that I've named would give you an idea of what not to do. And maybe you can come up with a better strategy of how to actually move the market for a new paradigm. Thanks for bearing with me, and I'll be staying with you throughout.
Thanks a lot, Maggie. Thanks a lot, the circle of denial. Yeah, and I think with the canvas, I think we're going to tackle a couple of these levels. Okay, so now off to Shinta. So Shinta is from the Netherlands. She said, yeah, if you introduce me, I'm an author, I'm a lecturer, I'm an advisor. So what I do know about Shinta is she's an economist. She's now really passionate about the purpose-driven economy, seeing what maybe the current or previous principles were, which are maybe not in line with how she looks at it and how many of us are now looking at it. So also quite active as an author. at the teaching economics for change at the School of Change, and she's also an executive coach using a lot of systemic principles, and I think that's where we met. So I'm quite excited to hear Shinta's insights. Shinta, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Wesley. I'm really happy to connect with you today to explore a new consumerism paradigm. And as Wesley said, I'm a traditional economist, but I've grown much more into economic philosophy than maybe that I would want. And I have a deep fascination for the existential dimension of economics. So I'm going to share a little bit of a story with you. And I might also take a little bit longer than 5 minutes. So thank you in advance for bearing with me. So in favor of the current consumerist paradigm, significant human progress was made over the past 200 years. We've of course seen a sharp decline in extreme poverty and infant mortality and the increase of life expectancy and the access to education. However, this progress has been attained at great expense. We have become richer, but we have not become happier. And our quest for economic growth has tilted a delicate balance between the human progress and prosperity of the living world that we depend on for our lives. The data from the United Nations Environment Programme shows us that per person, our global stock of natural capital has declined nearly 40% since the early 1990s, while produced capital has doubled and human capital has increased 20%. And now my Siri is joining the conversation. Hundreds of scientists are now warning us that global systemic collapse is a very credible scenario within this century. And in addition to that, it's now deeply affecting the human spirit as well, as we see a sharp rise in societal anxiety over a loss of biodiversity and even perhaps the loss of our futures. I wrote in our forthcoming book, The Mental Health of Nations is now taking a blow from the wealth of nations. So thank you, Adam Smith. Activist Terence McKenna mentioned to his students, to feel that we are doing to the earth would be like a man hitting himself on the head with a hammer. The feedback loop would be so short, in systemic terms, that he would stop immediately. Now we are feeling the hammer hitting, and it's starting to hurt severely. But what deeply concerns me is that we are showing the symptoms of a society in denial. We appear under the impression that we are still very much on track for progress and that we seem to have trouble to stop hitting ourselves on the head. Now time, or rather the lack thereof, has sharpened the contrast between the imperative for infinite growth and the need for sustainability and well-being. We just have this 1 decade in which we can only bend the curve of biodiversity loss through an integrated approach of conservation, of life-sustaining ecosystems, but also, and that's why I'm really happy that you're having this conversation right now, through a much wiser conduct in consumption and production. Now, the need for this wisdom to make an entrance in economic discourse implies to me that the economic problem has fundamentally become an existential problem. The existential problem being that we took the assumptions of the culture that we are born into for granted. And therefore, essentially, transformation requires a radical shift in thinking about the world and ourselves within it. So how do we transition into that sees to a more balanced world? Maybe unoriginally, I often resort to the remarkable work of Donella Meadows when pondering the systems transformation that we find ourselves in. Meadows left us with 12 leverage points to effectively intervene within a system. I'll skip 10 of them, immediately go to the second most impactful place to intervene, which is on the paradigm level, the level that you are discussing today. A paradigm, a collective idea, a firmly believed worldview is a source level for transformation of systems, but Meadows has also ranked one even more powerful point of impact to change systems, and this is to transcend paradigms completely. She kind of hilariously writes, to get at the gut feeling that there are paradigms and that in itself is a paradigm, and to regard that whole realization as devastatingly funny. Now, to me, to avail of such a way of thinking would mean total freedom. Freedom to connect with something that transcends the way we think about the world, into seeing how we on the deepest level would want the world to work. Something that holds a sense of purpose. And so back to the paradigm shift in consumerism you are seeking today. Beyond the shifting it, we can transcend it. The work lies in breaking free from the habits that confine our consumer conduct and come up with new ways of being in the world. To that end, my hope for the not so distant future is that we will remember something that we have lost along the way, a deep understanding. And allow me to shine a bit of a light historically on that. For purposes of farming, some 12,500 years ago, the first Mesopotamian farmers divided the world into animals and humans, nature and culture, mine and thine. In doing so, they bestowed upon humankind a narrative of dualism that eventually gave roots to the early capitalistic agenda that has fed its way into today's society as a dominant cultural construct. As a consequence, we are dualistic about what we are actually part of, the living world. Our perception of nature as an external factor enables the commodification and the exploitation of the living world just for human welfare. This cultural construct denies our embeddedness in and our dependency on nature. And what it's more, it validates today an extractive nature rather than a regenerative nature of our economies. But to become wiser in our consumption and our production, as I mentioned earlier, it is key to remember that we are deeply an ecological civilization, an ecologically oriented society that recognizes that we are in direct relationship with both each other and the world that surrounds us. In fact, this world that surrounds us is primary to our economies. Strikingly so, Michael Greer reframes the wealth of nations into the wealth of nature. We can only be economically active by the grace of the underlying natural value system. Without natural products and processes, humanity cannot produce or consume material things. Think about what lies behind all the human activities in an economy, the biological cycles that yield soil fertility, crop pollination, and countless other things of economic value, the hydrological cycles that push fresh water into reservoirs and taps, the tectonic processes in the crust that put economically useful metals and minerals into the veins of rocks, and of central importance, the extraordinary complex interplay of biological and geological processes that spent 500 million years storing away countless billions of tons of carbon under the Earth's surface in the form of fossil fuels. So when we hold ourselves fully accountable, and this is my provocative statement, when we hold ourselves fully accountable for the extractive nature of our economies and our conduct of consumption and production, we will be able to make a shift from thinking and speaking in terms of ecosystem services that are just there for our consumption, or rather for our taking, and reflect on our consumerism in a better relationship with nature, speaking and thinking in terms of reference, respect, abundance, care, and reciprocity, values that have no economic value just of yet, but that are invaluable to the emergence of a new, more sensible story for consumerists you are exploring today. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Shinta, for this philosophical approach as well. Thanks a lot. All right. So, a lot of planting seeds and getting some food for thought. So now it's up into the co-creation and the learning activity, and I pass the word with pleasure to the co-facilitators of today, Anna and Marissa. So Anna, please go ahead and you can share your screen.
Thank you. Just a second. Okay. You can see this bit, right? It's a canvas. So thank you very much, Maggie and Shinta, for all your sharing. I think it will be really interesting to see how that will impact the process that we're going to go through today. But before we go, I want to go a little bit deeper into the tool that we're going to use today, the multi-level perspective canvas. And you can see there 3 different levels that Wesley already mentioned. So it's the landscape level, the macro, the meso level, and the micro level. Sorry, I'm just going to hear a lot of noise. If someone can help me to mute those who are not talking. Thank you very much. And so the micro level is a level where innovation starts, innovation, entrepreneurship, and creativity of those in niches. And people start to develop radical new solutions, habits, and ways of life. And these niche innovations are not necessarily trying to change the entire system, but they might be responding to the local needs that are rising, or opportunities. But eventually, these individual initiatives start to coalesce and create kernels, kind of atoms of potential alternative system. And timing for these initiatives is vital, because entrepreneurial ventures creating these innovations, while they're critical for the process of forming a new system, they're not there to change it on their own. And they can only take off given when they give concrete expression to big shifts that are happening in values and needs. And that is happening at the macro level. So the landscape is the one where societal values and political ideologies and demographic trends and economic patterns show up. And that shapes the context in which we all operate, and those innovations also being created in which a system operates. For example, shifting attitudes, especially among young people, towards the links between the food, energy, and the climate change are now shaping the landscape in which the food industry operates. Some additional examples are global regulation aiming to eliminate modern slavery in supply chains. Another one is young people that are shifting from the ownership model to sharing resources model. And of course, increase awareness of climate change. Now, new developments at the micro level and macro level are still not enough to change the entire system, but they create the context in which change becomes possible at the meso level. And at this middle meso level, that's where the regime sits. And this regime is a combination of institutions, technologies, markets, and organizations that give a system its structure. To give an example, conducive regulation that enable production and consumption of plant-based products, milk, meat, cheese, and now supermarkets are offering it for sale for everybody to consume. So this meso level is the engine room of the system. And the system transition happens when one regime gives way to the emergence of the next. But to develop a different, better system, it is never enough for there to be change at the macro and the micro level. And there needs to be change at the meso level as well. There may be promising ideas and interesting experiments, but without a new regime, there is no new system. And so when system transition take place, it's as a result of the complementary developments happening at all three levels. And innovations at micro level start to gain momentum at the same time as changes at the macro landscape level create pressure for the regime to change. And that in turn creates windows of opportunity at the meso level for those innovations to take hold. So I hope with that, we can dive into the practice. I will share the link to the Miro board now with everyone. We'll stop sharing the link. And
I have to share it, Anna, just so you know.
Sorry? Oh, you
I have
already
to share it,
shared.
yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you. You were quick. Okay. So now we will assume that some of you are probably quite proficient with the board. Others maybe less so. So this is the board we're going, there are all kinds of different frames there. Please don't wander around. I'm bringing everyone here. And this is the board we're going to work on. Before that, we'll offer you a little bit of kind of guiding to those of us who maybe haven't tried the Miro board before. So on the left-hand side, you have a little panel, white panel, where you have kind of, there's an arrow, and after that there's a little sticky note. So it's a kind of a rectangle with a folded end. You can click on that. Maybe if I will share my screen actually, and then I can show people what I'm doing. So here, this is the little sticky, and I click there, and you can choose a sticky note. And if I click on it twice, I can also write on it. So that's all that you will have to do today. Grab sticky notes and write your thoughts and your ideas. Yeah, so we can start then with the first exercise. We will gradually uncover the questions which we would like you to work on. Marissa, would you like to take over?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anna. Okay, we're assuming that everyone now is proficient in Miro, so hopefully we don't get too lost. We'll start with the regime, and actually we've kind of pre-filled this one out already at the meso level, because we felt like that was something that we're short of time, and this is quite an involved exercise. So what we did was we put some of our own thoughts initially on what the dominant regime was. So what are, as Anna said, what are the kind of institutions, the technologies, the markets, and the organizations that kind of currently sort of run or actually influence heavily the current operating space that we're in, the current system. So we've put a few on there, and if anyone has any more they would like to add, please do so. We won't go through them, but just to talk about some of these things, you know, things like some of the political and I guess policy things like low taxes that encourage us to kind of consume or to trade between nations and geographies, that kind of, I guess, stimulate the economy in some ways, instead of having high taxes that stop people from importing or producing or manufacturing in certain places. And then we have things like an embedded norm of kind of people thinking that exponential growth is the only sort of paradigm that we're in. We felt that was a really important one because technology does offer that, that kind of paradigm. But on a kind of material level, is that necessarily the right thing that we want to be thinking about in our quest to kind of reduce this or kind of affect this paradigm of consumption? Another one that we thought was quite important was just having less costing more sometimes. So often that's something within the markets that's quite prevalent, where people will say, well, if you buy less of something, it's actually more expensive than it is if you buy bulk or if you buy more units of something. And that isn't just at a consumer level, that's also at kind of a trade level. Often there are mechanisms in place that encourage people to do that as well. So less often costs more once you've broken it down into a unit or a specific unit cost. And one last one just to pick up on is maybe that progress and development, and I think Shinta referred to this, is that progress and development is kind of seen as more, like is producing kind of more and building more is actually a sign of progress in our current paradigm. Those are some of the thoughts we have on the current regime. I'm going to ask one person just to cover this. Does anyone else want to share their thoughts on what the kind of dominant regime at the meso level has in terms of tech or market or an institution or the kind of norms that are in there? Who's put one on? Who's put accessibility through online platforms?
Yeah, hi, that's me, Maya.
Hi, Maya.
So I was thinking of platforms like Flipkart or Amazon, and you know, even during the COVID those are accessible, and what they've made is they've made the price really competitive for the customer, as well as we have a lot of options to choose from. So in that sense, it's becoming customized. So that's what I meant by accessibility through online platforms. So
Great.
I'm looking at it from a consumer point of view.
Mm. Okay, thanks. And do you think that things like that encourage, how does it encourage us in that, or how is that kind of dominating, or kind of advertently, or I guess inadvertently affecting the regime, or a sense of kind of impact?
Yeah, so one impact that I clearly see is in terms of cost being much lower than we were to buy it over the counter in a store or something like that. And many a times cost is the big criteria. So if we were to switch over to sustainable products, they are not affordable. So this, on the other hand, because I mean, they are able to break even on profits and all because of the scale of operations. So they make it available to the customer at uh, cheaper rates, and then there are those discounts and all those appeals of the big sale and all of that. So as a customer, those are things that, I mean, you're not looking beyond that. So that's how it but when so many of us across the globe are doing that, that's having its say on the system.
Great, thanks, Mark. Yeah, and cost being a key driver that kind of influences the kind of accepted within the current regime, that cost, or the lowest cost possible, is often something that it's a consumer level that drives some of that.
Right.
Okay, thanks. We'll move quickly because we've got very little time to cover all of them. And then what we'd like to do is move down, sorry, to we're going to start off actually with, we thought it'd be easier, is with the kind of niche innovations, and the kind of niche, what are the new innovations, right? What are the kind of new technologies and practices and lifestyles that we see emerging from the current level, the current micro level? So try and think of, so in this sense, try and think of like specific technologies and lifestyle changes and things like that, rather than to kind of abstract things. What are the new innovations? We'll take 5 minutes to kind of place your stickies, and then we'll spend 10 minutes to sort of discussing those. So take your time.
You might need to cut from 10 minutes to make everything on time. So maybe a little bit less than 10.
Okay.
So these are niche, not just innovations, but also certain practices that people started doing that are not common. Maybe new ideologies of ways of life that have emerged recently. Oh wow, there's still a lot. It's so great to have many people participating, so many ideas. Brilliant.
I think, and as Anna said, some of these might be, sorry, Anna said that some of these might not necessarily just be innovations. They might just be kind of small, localized people trying to solve some of the problems that they have, or just kind of subcultures that we're not aware of that are emerging from certain needs that they're trying to fulfill as well.
Yeah, for some people struggling with Miro or with the different interface, yeah, I would suggest just follow with the share screen we have, and have input via the chat.
Okay. Okay, John, so if you can see on the left side, there's a white panel. On the leftmost side of the board, there's the panel, and there's this sticky note. You see maybe second, or I don't know which one, but in your board, but it's a square with a little triangle folded. So you double click on it and you get these different sticky notes. Then you click on it and it opens a huge one, but you can also grab one and yeah. Sorry, and that's how you just double click and you can write on it. Maybe we can, let me see if we can prepare.
I was going to say, if you have anything you want to put in the window, in the chat box, I can also transfer it from the chat box onto a Miro sticky. So if you're having a little bit of trouble with Miro, then feel free to put it into the chat box and I'll try my best to transfer it in so everyone gets a chance to kind of have their say and add things.
And I also here have a green sticky that I will just paste more of them. Oh.
So just to kind of juxtapose a couple of things around, later on after this one, we'll be going to the macro level, and those are much, if we define what macro level is, it's much more kind of global or much more prevalent ideas or ideologies and values that are shaping on a much bigger scale. So try and think of this as kind of more small scale and localized in a way, and pockets of small things that are happening, rather than stuff that's happening much more at a global level, because we will be looking at that global level after this.
Yep. Okay, it's almost time. Marissa, do you want to? We can. It looks like most people have written what they have.
We can remove, yeah, we can move them up later then. So if you want, you can move them up to the landscape now or in the minutes, just so that we know which ones we're looking at. Yeah, no need to delete them, just move them, that's fine.
Again, if anyone is struggling with sticky notes, I posted, I put a bunch of them at the bottom of the frame. So you can just grab one, double click and write on them, and then you can move them wherever you want. That one that you wrote. Okay, time's up.
Okay. Sorry, I need to just give me 1 sec to have a look at what we want. I'm just gonna call out. I'm not gonna kind of I'm not gonna sort of analyze what's come out. So let's see how this works. Oh, okay. Tiny house lifestyle. Who put tiny house lifestyle? Please do come forward and share more. Tiny house lifestyle.
Unmute yourself.
Oh yeah, please do unmute yourself.
Yeah, maybe not.
No, okay. We'll try something else. Okay, I like this one. Free water fountains everywhere in the city. Can someone share more about that? Got a bunch of shy people today.
Okay.
You can unmute yourself. Does anyone want to share what they meant? Okay, I'm going to jump on that, and I'm going to say I think that is an interesting idea. I think when I think about that, I think about some controversy around some of the large FMCG companies who charge for water. And there's this kind of discussion around, you know, in what they're doing, they've often invested in infrastructure in order to extract some of that water, right, to extract that and then to sell it. Yet obviously access to water is almost like is actually a basic human right. But I wonder what people think about the fact that the companies have invested in infrastructure in cases where they're selling that. Does anyone have any opinions around that?
Well, as a food scientist, I don't think they're quite the same thing, because distilled or mineral water is actually highly purified and it has added benefits, whereas tap water is actually usually misunderstood to be less sanitary, which is also often not the case, in fact, after a lot of testing. In Tokyo now, and also in Hong Kong, there are already quite a lot of these programs that are trying to push for a citywide water fountains that are made available by these foundations that came together. So this is definitely something that's been happening for at least 5 years in Hong Kong now.
Mm. Okay, thanks, Maggie. I think that's an interesting point to differentiate between even the types of water that are available, and whether or not that's something that everyone should have access to, and whether or not it's kind of something we should be paying for. Okay, can someone else talk about let's see, the data and visualizations of consumption impacts? Somebody like to speak about that? Who put that sticky there, please?
Yeah, I think that was me,
Okay.
actually.
Sorry.
So I think yeah, just having being able to visualize and being able to see the effects of your purchases and so forth. And I think it goes back to what Maya was saying, like with Amazon, it's just like one click and you buy a product and it arrives at your door and you see nothing of what's going on behind that. It's so easy, it's so cheap, so on and so forth. But if you could have the data, if you could have the visualizations, and we could actually see the impact of what our actions are doing within these broader systems, that would adjust things. We'd start to account for things in different ways. You know, when we go to the shop and we see things on the shelf there, all we look at is the price. But if we could see all these other metrics in terms of its impact across different systems, and that's obviously going to require massive kind of data collection and then visualization and representation of that. And that could really influence people's decisions. Yeah.
I think Joss is onto something that I totally resonate with. The amount of information that is available for a single product used to be whatever the packaging can actually hold. So you can make the text super small and have different types of messaging there, but nobody's going to read it unless they forget their phone when they're pooping. The fact that you mentioned that there's really no more first moment of truth when consumers interact face to face with the product, they don't get to hold them anymore before they buy them. That actually says a lot about what we need for packaging. Do we really need that much plastic, for example? Do we need a secondary box just so that it looks more prestigious? So if it's for your self-use, if it's not a gift, why have so many different boxes? First of all. Secondly, can we actually have information on the boxes that trace back to how the raw material came to the very plant that put them together? Can we actually have more information that shows the consumer the difference in this brand, for example, if they actually have sustainable measures? So this type of information upon scanning a QR code can now be accessed. And of course, you don't need to scan any code if you just access the product's website. So e-commerce does have that advantage. And I'm seeing this happening across China right now after COVID-19 broke out. They do want to know where their food is from. So I think that has a lot of space for exploration, Joss. And I think we can definitely build on this theory or this concept.
Thanks, Maggie. Actually, I wanted to, is it just a curious, I actually used to work in a lot of packaging. And one of the kind of things that they talk about is obviously the fact that packaging often protects, in this case, say food, right? It often protects food, prolongs its shelf life, enables us to have it delivered from, you know, point A in Ecuador to, say, Singapore, right? What is the role of packaging in kind of helping us to reduce that impact if all that happens during transit is that food is wasted, for example? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Maybe Natalie, you also work with packaging, right? I can see you're here.
Well, maybe just to pick up what Marissa just mentioned, the packaging actually serves very different different purposes at this point, because e-commerce has really taken over a lot of our purchases. If it is something that has brand loyalty, meaning that if it's the same thing that you buy over and over again, there's really no point of looking at the packaging. And so it's really about the information that is available for you. And if there's some new information, what would attract the consumer's interest? So that's definitely the case. And I would also add that packaging is not just for transport. Packaging needs to serve up to its entire shelf life. So a lot of people ask, why can milk be sold in plastic bags, but not, let's say, like Coke, for example? Because Coke needs to hold carbon dioxide. It needs to be shelf stable for at least 2-3 years. And so a bag cannot actually have that. It's not going to be enough barrier for all that. So there are quite a lot of reasons why packaging are the way they are, but the information on packaging is really what I feel is completely obsolete at this point.
Interesting to separate out. Thanks, Maggie. We'll just do one more because I'm mindful of time. How about laying down generation? Can someone just lastly, who put laying down generation?
I did. I have a sense that you're gonna pick that.
Sorry, I keep picking.
This is a new movement in China. Some call it a challenge, a problem, and some actually celebrate this is a kind of new positive movement, and almost like a sort of protesting, a protest from the young generation, because they just couldn't keep up with the whole 996 sort of working hours and you know, the mainstream definition of success, how success looks like. So they just kind of switch off. They wanted to live in a very frugal life, and they want to minimize their consumption. They want to just to live based on their value. So they call themselves a laying down generation, because they literally just laying down.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. And I hadn't heard of that, but I guess, is it a response, like you said, a response to actually the hyper on consuming, working, and just kind of that continuous growth and progress, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing. You know, if you think about the Chinese workaholic stereotype, and this is a very refreshing sort of movement, starting by the Generation Z or millennial.
Yeah, no, it's great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Is there anyone else?
We have to move on.
Yeah, we have to. Okay, we have to move on. I was saying we have to. Okay, thanks, guys. So we'll move to the next level. So we have the regime, which we very pre-filled. We've had the micro, and now we're up to. Oh, sorry, I moved the board. The macro. Can you? Sorry, would you mind locking the board down, please? Thanks. So this one is actually kind of bigger picture, right? Things that we're seeing across the landscape, their kind of values, ideologies, demographics, and economics, in which the context is operating in this context. Sorry. So these are kind of bigger shifts, bigger things that are happening, perhaps at a global level. So it might be something like urbanization, although I don't necessarily think that's necessarily a new one, or it might be a specific kind of political ideology. So if we can think of that, that's above on the left-hand side of this canvas. We can use the stickies again. We have another maybe 4 minutes, perhaps, trying to keep on time. So jump in there. Anything, it could be political, economic, maybe a cultural and societal shifts, or kind of what's happening and what's shifting as well.
Yes, you have definitions actually locked on a side.
Yeah.
I know it happens to me that after some time I was like, wait a second, what was that? So you can go to a little bit to your left and then read again to kind of clarify the concept.
Yeah.
Whoop. It sets the context for the entire system.
Yeah.
Should have put music every time I say that, and I don't.
Where's the music button?
Trade blocks. What are trade blocks? Bernard is asking, what about ideas like trade blocks? If someone is familiar with the concept, I'm not.
Yeah, some of these can go across more than one. Sorry, go on ahead, Bernard. Or whoever was speaking, sorry.
I'm just wondering about whether, you know, at this level, do you also consider ideas like how countries are signing all sorts of agreements to come together to allow for more free movement of goods, and does that actually have an adverse impact?
I think that is in a regime level.
I see.
Because that's structural. That's not in the kind of value ideology level.
Okay, right. Thanks for the clarification.
Sure, thanks for asking.
I guess just to add to that, but I can see why you're saying that if it happens, but it kind of impacts at a global level, it impacts at quite a large geographical level. I get what you say. And not all of these are completely strictly delineated. I think it's obviously useful to try and have that delineation, but some of them obviously go into 2 or 3 of those levels anyway.
Yeah, it's a bit like the GATT, right? GATT and the WTO, you know, they put in place all sorts of things around the world. Yeah, thank you.
So they are a regime, right? That is a regime level thing, as Anna said, but yeah.
Miles says the voices of indigenous communities to live of natural resources. What do you think? I mean, if it's a really kind of almost like a movement, right? In our assumption, I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not sure here actually, but it might be the micro level still. But if it becomes a bigger movement, something like trying to address the ecological degradation, right, or ecosystem restoration, there's a lot of kind of pushback there that the indigenous knowledge and voices are not necessarily taken into account. And so I think if that bigger movement of protecting nature and restoration of ecosystems would take off, incorporating those voices, that perhaps will become the landscape movement. My view for the moment that it's probably still in the micro level. Please, anyone who wants to share their thoughts of it can jump in. Okay, time's up, more or less.
Okay. I like this one. Polarization as a social media effect. Anyone who knows? Can somebody speak to that? Who wrote polarization as a social media effect?
Well, maybe we can just open to whoever wants to share what they wrote.
Anna, if I can take you up on that.
Sure.
Yeah. I essentially think there are 2 issues. One, we don't cost account for production of natural resources. We assume they will be renewed for free. And that essentially, we are paying variable cost for natural resources. So that marginalizes nature and the communities that own them. And that's the global subsidy that runs capitalism. 2,
no, where did you post that? Sorry.
I think on landscape.
Oh, okay.
And secondly, we incorporate for perpetuity while we are made for mortality. So I think that allows us to create a lot of marginalization as wealth extractors. So we don't recycle our economics, we only recycle our ecology and biology. That leads.
Sorry, I didn't catch, which point were you picking up on, Bharat? Sorry, I missed.
No, I was trying to suggest why nature and communities get marginalized in the current
Okay, yeah,
system.
yeah,
We don't pay for the cost of growing the tree. We only pay for the cost of distributing it.
Mm.
And so and that's why communities and nature are marginalized in the current system.
How do you, just out of curiosity, and again, I'm just playing devil's advocate, how do you sort of, or do you have any thoughts about how we could change that system where we're not, you know, it's a natural resource, so who has ownership of it, right? When we think about the commons or broader than that, Mother Nature, how do you think we could kind of change that?
So in Estonia now, there are market instruments that support maintenance of forests.
Mm.
And so there are market instruments that are linked to nature. That they show asset growth if you nurture nature and natural resources, and not if you extract them.
And who is who runs that, or who is responsible for that? Those market instruments, like the creation of them.
The communities that own that that resource, or under whose custody the resource is placed. So it's a community or ownership of the commons to protect.
And do you have any? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just saying, do you have any kind of more details about that? It's a very interesting idea. It's not run by the kind of the regime, so to speak. It's something that the communities have initiated themselves or have had support with.
It's a market instrument. It's like you can pay for maintaining a forest rather than cutting it down. So I can share the link in chat. I'll just find it for you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. Oh, is that the incorporate for mortality, not to perpetuity?
Yes. So we don't depreciate our own self in our balance sheet. You know, so our most precious asset is our human body, but we are not depreciating it. So we believe that we are immortals and our balance sheets live forever, and we keep accumulating things on it.
I'm curious. This is really interesting. I think that's a really interesting point, because on balance sheets, you do have assets that depreciate over time, right? How do you start calculating from the moment you're born, if you're thinking about your material body? How do you kind of put an asset, put a price or a cost or a value on that, and then depreciate it? Is that something that's coming, that exists?
So my life expectancy is known. Each country's life expectancy is known. So where I come from, I should depreciate by my net worth by 1/70 every year. And so at death, my net worth should be 0. Why doesn't my balance sheet know that I have no liquidity anymore?
But what's the currency? Sorry, just to be, what's the currency we're talking about? Where, because it has to have some kind of value exchange. Where is the currency that you would see that your body, is it a financial value? Is it ecological value in that way?
Say the life expectancy is 70 years in a country. So that means the human body is depreciating 1/70 every year in that country. So everybody's net worth should be reduced 1/70. And so at death, net worth should be 0. It will allow you to recycle economics.
Okay. That's very interesting. Please do share. I'd love to continue this conversation. I'm curious about how that would work. Okay, we have, let's move on to the next one. I think, sorry, we haven't got time to cover everything. So I'll hand over to, is it Anna or Wesley who will take over? Sorry, it's not enough time to cover everything in depth.
Wesley.
No worries, Wesley. Okay, so I see a question also. So what do you recommend to do after mapping all this system? What tools to use to challenge current system and facilitate change? I think, Gabriella, I think that's what we're going to do now. So we have mapped now the 3 levels in the system, the macro, the meso, and the micro, and now we're going to see how they interact with each other. So it's going to the right side of the canvas, the top right side, and there we'll have the field, what are the windows of opportunity emerging. So I see a lot of people joining here. So please go ahead. So we discussed now the changes on the landscape. So ideology, the values, the demographics. So all the changes that we mapped in the last exercise with Marissa. So how can this create a window of opportunity looking at shifting the paradigm of consumption? So that's key. So we have mapped now the landscape. We discussed a bit changes and which of these changes could be a window of opportunity if we look at changing the paradigm of consumption. Is that clear for everybody? I think we're all at the right part of the board. So please go ahead and just use the post-its to do the same as before. And an example, of course, like a window of opportunity is if you see the wealth at the bottom of the pyramid. If you look at low-class families, an example with a fast-moving consumer good with Unilever in India is providing small or one-use sachets or soap bars, which they could buy. But in that way, when generating that revenue, you also increase hygiene, you increase life quality. And with this created revenue, you can give back and use this profit to improve the communities and the society. So that's for example, one aspect that is an example like the wealth at the bottom of the pyramid. But please go ahead and share your thoughts that you have on this matter. So maybe not, refrain maybe yourself from writing down solutions. So, but maybe pinpoint what are certain landscapes changes that could be a window of opportunity, and based out of that window of opportunity, out of that comes change. So I think with the end solution, let's hold on that for a moment because we have one more frame to go to after this one. But this is where could be seeds planted as a window of opportunity. The how is for later. Okay, I see some people with circular economy. So why is that a window of opportunity? Could you elaborate on that potentially?
Circular economy was me. So I think it creates a whole new series of opportunities really in terms of interconnecting across the whole economy, really. It's a paradigm shift, and then obviously being able to recycle and reuse and upcycle and so forth, and keep everything in circulation, right? Instead of dumping it out and pulling in more materials. So I think there's a whole kind of spectrum of possibility of windows of opportunities there for different kinds of innovations, just in terms of connecting. It's about connecting across the whole economy, isn't it? So as to keep things within the system instead of sucking in more and pushing out more at the other end.
Okay, thanks, Jos. Eyes on the earth. That one is intriguing me. Eyes on the earth.
That was me.
It's funny today. Okay.
I was recently just reading about all the tech. I mean, not dissimilar to what Jos was saying, reading about all the tech that allows us to measure a lot of things. So again, having that visibility is a window of opportunity in that sense of, oh, okay, well, now we have the information. What happens next? That was all. I don't want to take up the time speaking.
Anybody else wants to share their point? What's for you a key window of opportunity? I see Marco, a new era of cooperatives, green, sustainable, resilient. Yeah. Any key aspects there, Marco? You can feel free to speak up. And I think for the sake of time after this minute, maybe we jump to the next one instead of, what do you think?
Maybe we will allow people to, oh, it's 6:30. Oops, yeah, you're right.
6:23.
Time flies, okay, got it. Yeah, you're right, okay. So if someone, we have about 10 seconds, if someone really wants to kind of jump in and share what they're writing about and explain a little bit more, that would be great. Because without you explaining, it's, yeah, there's a lot of kind of meaning lost. So that would be great. Okay, if no one, then as Wesley said, we're really running out of time. So we'll move to the next question, which is then we're going to skip to the ones covered in red, right? Because there is no time. But after we have those pressures, whoops, after we've had, so I'll uncover. After we have the kind of the pressure from the kernels of innovation and changing societal kind of values and the landscape level that creates a much kind of a different context for everything, and there are these windows of opportunity, then what does, let's imagine, given on that, how does the new paradigm, new pattern could look like? Right, and we are in the regime level, so we're talking about structural changes that need to happen in at the level of institutions and organizations, infrastructure, right? So this is kind of very practical aspects. Think about the example that I gave about vegetarianism and veganism, right? Where these used to be niche, and then more and more people kind of this growing awareness of the connection between food and climate change and pollution and the way food is produced gave rise to new regulations that allowed to produce more plant-based foods. And then supermarkets were all of a sudden, oh, now we can sell this to a much wider range of consumers. So that's the kind of change we're talking about. Right, so if there is a potential to have flying cars, then what kind of infrastructure we will need to achieve that, for example, right? And do feel free, again, we are at 6:26, so we're short of time. Feel free as you're writing just to jump in and share as we go what is going on for you here. And also maybe one other question to think about that I think is important, given all these changes, what are our roles, right? So the first question we ask as we started is what kind of different roles we're playing in the system. Oops, what just happened? Ooh. Everybody see the, oops. Oh, okay, sorry, everything disappeared for a second for me. What kind of role we can play, each and every one of us, in this changing environment, on the individual level, or maybe, yeah, on a community level, on a collective level. And how, because there was someone was asking, so after doing this exercise, what's next? Well, there's a lot, of course, we need to think about and understand about the system, much well beyond the 60 minutes of exercise, barely, that we're doing here. But overall, I think it's a good reflection to to do after that is to think about it and what are different roles that we can play and change to enable those new patterns to emerge and to become. Actually, one of the questions in this canvas is how can we support the innovations that are coming up? And what's important to remember in these three different levels, they all need to happen almost simultaneously or one after another in order for us to be successful. So it's a never one person thing or even one organization thing. And I think that is really kind of crucial point to take away. It is collaborative effort. Okay. So I see most people have kind of finished, and except me, nobody else talked. So people choose to put maybe in a chat, lobbying governments and corporations. Yeah, all of that. I personally think we need to do all of it. Support innovations, lobby governments, raise awareness. It is everything. Okay. Wesley, would you like to do, if you still have time, then we can kind of try to be on time. And if people feel they are not done yet, feel free to continue writing on the post-its, but we can go into the kind of summary. How does that sound?
That sounds good, because I also personally need to drop off, so that's a bit impolite for me as a co-facilitator, but today I really did not manage my agenda well, so people are waiting. But I think if you can guide people to this frame, like just a closing exercise, I think everything went a bit quick at the end, but the main thing was we learn, we co-create. It's not that we need to have things finalized. But this was it for the multi-level perspective canvas around transitioning a bigger system. So if everybody can just note down, maybe in a quick post-it, was there something new for you, something surprising, something you want to try, you want to dig a bit deeper in, and or something that was missing today, and all feedback is received very kindly. So please go ahead. I think Anna has guided you to this closing frame. And by this, I need to say thanks to all of you for joining. Please stay a bit longer to finish. And it was great to be here, and see you next time. All the best.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Wesley.
Thank you, Wesley. So Wesley is leaving, but please, if you do have a few minutes, we really want to thank you for participating in this session, and take the time to kind of get this closure, as Wesley said, about what did you learn, like something new, or what was surprising for you. Is there something you wanted to try? And is there something missing for you in this exercise? The session is recorded. I'm not sure what are the plans of sharing it. We'll get back to you. We've noted all the requests for it, and really happy that it brought so much interest. It's really exciting. We're definitely going to synthesize all your inputs and come up with a visual representation of them, and we will share it with you. And you can take it with you and have conversations, reflections, use it for your own kind of engagement purposes. And yeah, that's about it. Anything I forgot, Marissa?
No, I don't think so. Just yeah, I'm sure a lot of you have come already from the SI platform, the network, the Mighty Network platform. But if anyone else who's not on there would like to join, we welcome everyone to come along. And there are loads more interesting conversations, much more in depth. You can blog and respond to your heart's content, and really kind of yeah, some radical ideas, some new ideas, and lots of information, conversation there. So yeah, please do join if you haven't already. And we'd love to sort of like have you back again for our next event when we hold it. Thanks everyone for joining in. We'd love to hear from you vocally as well.
Yeah, just acknowledging it's 2 minutes past 6:30. Thank you to those who could stay a little bit after, and your feedback. That's really great. Something surprising. If you again feel free to have open mic and share more. I know my co-facilitator Marissa also needs to drop off, but I can stay for a little bit longer. And
I think Joss is still here. Joss often
great.
has some really interesting perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. So we can please open your mics and your videos, and we can have a more open chat.
Well, for me, it was, I just put one last sticky up there in terms of something new. What Maggie was saying was really interesting, actually, about having to have kind of concrete frameworks for these organizations. Otherwise, they can, they just want to get some kind of branding or something out of it, and they'll show up and talk, but they won't actually do anything. And the need for kind of coherent frameworks and pathways for them to engage. And I think, as always, things that are super simple, frictionless, and well-structured, and actionable, and things that they're able to get involved in and held accountable to. I think that's really important, isn't it? Coming up with those. And it was also about kind of standards, setting frameworks and standards, and then having them held to them. I mean, there's so much potential in that in general, like organic food or things like this. If we all got into that, and you're assessing it, right, and you're collecting the data and you're seeing the impact and so forth, I think that has so much potential.
Yeah, very interesting.
Another one I find, I used to have a startup, a 3D printing startup. I was very involved in the movement of decentralized manufacturing. I think that has massive potential, actually, to really rewire the whole global supply chain and materials supply chain. If we actually decentralize manufacturing in that way, I mean, it's just one kind of innovation that I think potentially could have massive impact. You think so much of this, the way materials move around in our economy of production and consumption hinges so much around large factories and manufacturing centers. And if we change that aspect to decentralize production, it would have a huge effect. And also the marketing thing too. Actually, that's a really interesting one. Like, there's people here, the point people in London, working on the marketing as a kind of leverage point in the whole system. Like, how do you start to influence? They did kind of systems change initiatives around trying to get all these large marketing companies here together and get them kind of signing up to agendas around systems change and kind of new standards in marketing and advertising, so that they don't create all the problems, like trying to just get people continuously consuming, you know, but actually turn marketing could be potentially something really kind of beneficial and constructive in our world. Those are just some thoughts.
Thanks, Joss. I think many of us who've been in that area of work really feel that it has the power to influence in a really positive way. People are asking for your LinkedIn, Joss. So if you can put it in the chat, that would be good. You can find Joss at Systems Innovation and on LinkedIn. Great to have you part of the community.
Yeah. Alex is saying empathy. If we had more empathy, would the current system arise? Well, maybe not, probably not. So it's definitely an important one to work on. And would decentralization of manufacturing benefit? Well, that's definitely a shift that is happening, right? Decentralization of manufacturing and kind of localized manufacturing. So that will be interesting to see. I don't know if anyone put that sticky on, but if you did, then yeah, it will be interesting to see how, I mean, can imagine what new structure for the system can emerge from that.
Great. I've got to drop off, so I'm actually going to stop recording. We'll probably put this up on YouTube, I guess, if anyone wants to see. And yeah, just hopefully we'll see you all again next time.
Yes.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Great to see so many new faces on here, and hopefully next time we won't just pick, we honestly didn't know, but we won't just pick the stickies from the people who are in the community.
Yeah. Thanks.
We definitely don't want group think. Thanks a lot. Bye guys.
Bye.